Good morning, everyone. This morning we arrested Massachusetts State Representative Francisco Paulino, who represents the 16th Essex District, which includes the cities of Lawrence and Methuen, for pandemic unemployment insurance fraud, pandemic loan fraud, and money laundering. He is charged in an 11-count indictment that was unsealed today. A grand jury in Boston also returned an 11-count indictment charging the sitting mayor of Lawrence, Brian DePina, with pandemic loan fraud and money laundering. As many of you know, Mayor DePina was arrested last week on a criminal complaint. He is alleged to have stolen approximately $1.5 million in public taxpayer money he used to fund his mayoral campaign, pay his personal tax liabilities, and pay off personal loans. The date for his arraignment on the indicted charges has yet to be set. According to the Paulino indictment, Mr. Paulino devised a scheme to fraudulently obtain more than $700,000 in federal pandemic-related relief funds. It is alleged that Paulino used some of the money for his own personal use, including real estate expenses, loan payments, and transfers to his campaign account. Other money he flipped around and lent to other individuals at higher interest rates than the pandemic loan rate, basically making more money for himself at the expense of others. Prior to being elected for a seat in the Massachusetts House of Representatives in November of 2021, it is alleged that Paulino ran several businesses, including Madison Tax in Lawrence. Madison Tax provided tax preparation and business planning services to small businesses. Paulino's alleged fraud began in April of 2020 when he allegedly filed an online application for pandemic unemployment assistance benefits, not for himself, but rather in the name of an unwitting 77-year-old relative. The application falsely claimed that the relative had worked for Madison Tax in 2019. Once the unemployment claim was approved, based on the false information Pauline submitted, funds were deposited into an account that Paulino controlled. From April of 2020 until September of 2021, Paulino filed false weekly certifications with the Massachusetts Department of Unemployment Assurance, all in the relative's name. These unemployment benefits that Paulino fraudulently obtained for himself totaled over $44,000. Paulino also allegedly filed fraudulent paperwork with the Small Business Administration in order to obtain economic injury disaster loans, commonly referred to as EIDLs. Some of these applications were for businesses Paulino owned, and others were filed in the name of a business owned by a client of Madison Tax. It is alleged that Paulino used the fraudulently obtained money for his own benefit. First, Paulino allegedly filed an application for an EIDL in which he falsely represented that the revenues of one of his businesses, Jackson Enterprise, were over $426,000 during the time frame of January of 2019 to January of 2020. The problem is that the business wasn't in operation until August of 2020. The SBA approved the loan based on the alleged false information and sent $136,000 to an account controlled by Paulino. It is further alleged that Paulino obtained an EIDL of over $109,000 for Madison Tax in May of 2020 and later requested an increase to the Madison Tax EIDL. In July of 2021, the SBA approved an increase of over $290,000 to Madison Tax's EIDL, and Paulino falsely certified that he would use that $290,000 as working capital for Madison Tax. Instead, it is alleged that he loaned most of that money to other individuals through another of his businesses, Madison Mortgage, charging interest rates significantly higher than the interest rate he was getting for the Madison Tax loan. It is further alleged that Paulino took advantage of one of his tax clients by misrepresenting the terms and conditions for obtaining EIDL loans. As alleged in the indictment, based on applications Paulino filed, the SBA awarded over $345,000 in EIDL loans to his client's business. Paulino then had that client forward $200,000 of those funds to him, which he used to partially fund a $680,000 mortgage for an individual for the purchase of real property. The interest rate Paulino charged on the mortgage loan was higher than the interest rate from the idol. In total, it is alleged that Paulino fraudulently obtained over $700,000 in federal benefits that he was not entitled to, and used the funds to line his own pockets. The conduct alleged by the Lawrence mayor and the district state representative is appalling. Everyone listening today knows how difficult it was for Americans during the pandemic and how challenging it was for businesses. The money these two individuals allegedly scammed was meant for hardworking Americans and struggling business owners, not for two greedy individuals who lied and stole for their own personal benefit. I think it should be clear now that we are taking fraud seriously in Massachusetts. From SNAP and housing fraud to voter fraud to pandemic relief fraud, we are dialed in and laser focused on rooting out every bit we find. We will continue to hold fraudsters accountable until the stealing stops. It is never a proud moment when we arrest a public official, but we will continue to do it until the message is received. No one is above the law, and no one gets a pass. I'm now going to turn things over to FBI.
Good morning. My name is Ted Dox. I'm the Special Agent in charge of FBI Boston. We expect our elected officials to look out for our best interests, protect public resources, and to uphold the trust placed in them by their constituents. We do not expect them to betray that trust by cashing in on public health crisis and defrauding government programs to line their own pockets. But today, Massachusetts State Representative Francisco Paulino and Lawrence Mayor Brian DePena are accused of doing exactly that. A sitting mayor in a multicultural gateway city and a state representative in the Merrimack Valley have now been indicted by a federal grand jury for allegedly misleading their customers, constituents, and the government to defraud pandemic relief programs out of millions of dollars. Shortly after sunrise this morning, we arrested State Representative Francisco Paulino outside an apartment complex in Lawrence. His arrest comes on the heels of Mayor DePena's arrest in Lawrence a little over a week ago. Both men stand accused of lying to the federal government to fraudulently obtain more than $2 million in pandemic-related relief funds to bankroll their personal debts, political ambitions, and real estate ventures. They're also accused of trying to conceal their criminal cash flows by laundering that money. It started back in 2020, prior to Francisco Paulino's election to office, when he operated a tax preparation business, which he allegedly used as a vehicle to make hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent claims, COVID-related relief. To carry out this alleged scheme, Mr. Paulino betrayed the trust of some of those closest to him when he used the personal information of a 77-year-old family member to get unemployment assistance and a client to obtain small business loans. He's also accused of using other intermediaries to funnel this money into his own personal and business bank accounts. In fact, Paulino even used Heavenly Donuts, a donut shop in Lawrence that he founded, to obtain roughly $136,000 in fraudulent small business loans. As for Mayor DePena, we allege he started misdirecting public money for personal gain 6 years ago, back when he was still a city councilor. Simply put, both men are accused of treating the COVID-19 pandemic as their own personal cash cows, at a time when job losses were fast and furious and so many people needed help quickly. These relief programs were intended to assist workers, families, and businesses suffering massive economic upheaval. We believe every dollar these men fraudulently obtained was a dollar denied to someone who genuinely needed that assistance. Sadly, as long as there are government programs with money to dole out, there will be swindlers trying to take advantage of them. But it's particularly loathsome when these programs are allegedly exploited by public servants elected to serve the public and to protect taxpayer dollars. The public's trust is both vital and fragile, so the FBI's message today is clear. Emergency circumstances do not suspend the rule of law, and public service is not a shield from accountability. We want you to know that our investigation is active and ongoing, and anyone with information on this type of fraud occurring at any level. We're asking you to share what you know with the FBI by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can go online to tips.fbi.gov. If you like, you can remain anonymous. My sincere thanks to the agents, analysts, accountants, and prosecutors who have worked so hard to advance this case, specifically FBI Boston's public corruption team, U.S. Attorney Leah Foley and her team, as well as partners at the IRS Criminal Investigation and State Office of the Inspector General. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Wadika. I am the Assistant Special Agent in charge of IRS Criminal Investigations, Boston Field Office. I would like to start by thanking United States Attorney Leah Foley, as well as our law enforcement partners for their hard work and dedication to this investigation. IRS Criminal Investigations' primary focus is to investigate financial crimes, and those crimes take many forms, from tax evasion to money laundering and theft of public funds. In this instance, Mayor Brian DePena and State Representative Francisco Paulino obtained and misused federal funds intended to help those most in need during a worldwide pandemic. These funds were intended to help small businesses survive unprecedented hardships. Instead of using these funds for their intended purposes and investing in their own businesses' ongoing operations, they used these funds to help themselves. Funds were intentionally diverted from bank accounts controlled by these men and used to fund items that helped no one but themselves, including Representative Paulino purchasing property and Mayor DePena paying his own outstanding personal federal tax liability. Let that sink in for a moment. Mayor DePena paid his own federal tax liability, something that every single American is expected to do, using funds that he took from the federal government. That is unfair to every single American who pays their fair share of taxes and fulfills their civic responsibility. CARES Act fraud is a large-scale nationwide issue that has affected this nation, with millions of dollars in federal funds being siphoned off by criminals for their own use, which reduced the pool of funds for those who truly needed it. IRS-CI is committed to our continued efforts to investigate all instances of CARES Act fraud. Today is a warning to all those who have conducted fraud connected to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you think that you have gotten away with it, you are wrong. We are continuing to work with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners to identify you, investigate you and your illegal acts, and ensure that you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Thank you.
I am Jeffrey Shapiro, the Inspector General for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thank you, United States Attorney Foley, Special Agent Dox, Assistant Special Agent Watlick, other leaders who are with us, members of the trial team, members of the investigative teams, including investigators from the Massachusetts Office of the Inspector General's office who helped develop this case, and most importantly, members of the public. Today's actions demonstrate the strength of our federal and state partnership to hold those with nefarious intent accountable. The alleged conduct uncovered today, plus the conduct uncovered 2 weeks ago, not only diverted federal pandemic funds from individuals and small businesses who truly needed such relief to get back on their feet, but also violated the oath of these two public officials that they took to uphold the law. These defendants were elected to serve the public, and instead, it is alleged, they served themselves. Public service should never be self-service. I want to thank those who made initial tips to our office. I want to thank our investigators and other investigators that worked on this case, and I want to encourage the public, should they have information or tips on any case that they think is concerning, to contact the Massachusetts Office of the Inspector General and make a tip, whether anonymous or otherwise. You can see from today's events that these types of tips matter. We take everything seriously, and we work closely with our colleagues and partners. Thank you. Get out of here. Thank you, Madam
dancing.
Minister. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take some questions.
Is there a specific push for enforcement in Lawrence area, or is this just a coincidence?
It's just a coincidence. We've brought these cases in against defendants across the Commonwealth.
How did both of these investigations begin?
They began through analysis of data that Ted?
I think like many of these cases, they began through a variety of sources that we have, the community. That's why we pushed out that call. If anyone has any thing that they want to tell us, if any of these types of frauds are going on, to let us know. Oftentimes it starts in that way as well. We utilize that public voice to oftentimes give us that key to kind of push things further, but there's a lot of different techniques in which we use to predicate our cases.
When did the investigations begin?
Investigations began in approximately 2023.
You mentioned Representative Paulino taking this money, then loaning it out at a higher interest rate. In layman's terms, is that like loan sharking, or what is he being accused of?
If it was his own money, he could have loaned it out at whatever rate he wanted. It's illegal because he signed documents attesting that that money was going to be used for working capital in a business, not to profit off the backs of other people.
These are two high-profile examples in quick succession. Should we expect to see more of this? Do you have investigations coming with other public officials?
I can't comment on whether there are other investigations against other public officials, but as we have all made it very clear, no one is above the law. If you have broken the law and the evidence shows that you have committed a crime, you will be arrested.
Is there any connection between these two cases? Did one lead to the other? Did somebody, it sounded like Inspector General Shapiro said there might have been some sort of tips on these.
So all I can say is there are two separate indictments, and anything that has to do with the relationships between the cases or the individuals just is not public yet.
Do you treat these defendants any differently than the average person? They're elected officials, there's trust in them. We're hearing about combined $2 million. They get any special treatment in connection with what they allegedly did?
Special treatment from my office? No. They committed the fraud, and they're going to be charged like anyone else would have who committed the fraud. Now, do we hold press conferences when we just arrest the John Doe on the street for this type of fraud? No. But this is two public elected officials, and the community deserves to know.
And you called it appalling?
It is appalling. They've stolen from the federal taxpayer, from all of us. They have stolen from all of us. And then they ran for elected office, asking people to put their faith in them. That, to me, is appalling.
And for elected officials that did this 5 years ago, here we are today, what is your message?
These investigations have not stopped. There is a long statute of limitations that was intentionally set by Congress, knowing that because the money was flowing out so quickly and rapidly to protect American businesses who legitimately needed it, that there would likely be a lot of fraud. And that is what we have found. These aren't the first cases that my office has brought alleging these types of fraud.
State Rep. Paulino is also a tax attorney. Is that an aggravating factor in your view? In other words, should he especially have known better because of his training and his education?
Everyone can judge for themselves. But having specialized knowledge would tend to suggest that it wasn't a mistake.
So for elected officials, I think they can skirt the U.S. Attorney's Office. You say what?
Try us, and you'll find out.
Which is coming after them, or?
We go out, we follow the evidence. Wherever that evidence leads us is where we land. And if that evidence leads us to the doorstep of somebody who is an elected official, to a doctor, to a teacher, to a law enforcement officer, Nobody gets special privileges just because of their titles or their positions they hold.
Questions? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.